Welcome to our panel of alumni postgraduate judicial clerks. My name is Tamara Stephan, and I'm an Assistant Director of Career and Professional Development here at Brooklyn Law School. I will go through a few housekeeping things before turning the program over to our moderator and our panelists. First, we wanted to get a sense of who is in the audience, so we're going to do a poll. So please, answer the poll so we can see who's here. So while you're doing the poll, I am going to share my screen. And so for those of you who are current students, you will see that we have a couple of upcoming seminars. On Thursday, there will be an information session about judicial internships and externships. And on Wednesday, March 10th, there will be an information session about postgraduate judicial clerkships. We also plan to do an information session with respect to the Second Circuit Staff Attorney's Office. We haven't heard back from them to set that. If you have any questions during the course of today's program, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to submit questions. Please do not wait until the end of the program to type in your question. Please type in your question in real time. However, please note that your question may not be answered in real time. I will be monitoring the Q&A throughout the program. This is how the program will proceed. The moderator and the panelists will each introduce themselves and quickly speak or briefly speak about their experiences. There will be some discussion about some pre-selected topics. Then there will be the Q&A. If your question has not already been answered during the course of the program, then it will be asked during the Q&A. If your question is one that I can answer, I will just type in the answer in the Q&A box. With that, I turn the program over to our moderator, Professor Jodi Balsam.
Hi, everybody. I'm Professor Jodi Balsam. I know a lot of you, as I see on the attendance list. Thank you for being here today. One of our premier panels over the course of this January Jumpstart, which has been enormously successful, and thank you all for your support on that. So we're here today to talk to 5 Brooklyn Law School alums who have all experienced the wonderful educational career building role of judicial clerk in all sorts of settings, both in federal and state court. I too was a judicial clerk in another century. I clerked on both the district court and appellate court level here in New York. I can tell you about the value of clerking. It's an incredible learning experience. It furnishes your resume, it opens career doors, it provides you with a mentor in the judge that you clerk for, usually for life, an instant network of former law clerks to support you throughout your career. And you're going to hear about all this and more from our 5 amazing alums who volunteered to be here today. And we're going to let them introduce themselves. You see all their names in the Zoom boxes, and they're going to tell you a little bit about their clerkship experiences, and for those who've already moved on from clerking, where they are now. And we'll start with Christine Rodriguez, who is BLS class of 2010. Go ahead, Christine.
Okay, good, I'm unmuted. Well, thank you, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for all of the participants who are spending your Friday morning with us. So just a bit of background, I graduated law school in 2010 and went straight to clerking in the commercial division of the New York County Supreme Court, which I'm sure everyone knows is the trial court for Manhattan, the civil branch. And within the civil branch of the trial court in Manhattan, there's something called the commercial division, which can take certain types of commercial cases that meet a monetary threshold and certain subject matters. In that division, there's, I think maybe now there's somewhere between 7 and 8 judges. And unlike a lot of the other parts of the New York State court system, the commercial division judges have both career clerks and term clerks. So they have certain spots that are more akin to the federal system where law clerks spend a year or two clerking, and then they have positions where people spend their entire careers or a much longer period of time clerking. So I started as a term clerk with my Justice Kapnick in the commercial division. And there were a whole series of things that just happened to happen over time. Her career clerk became a judge, got elected to the bench right as I was starting. So he left, and we had another senior clerk come into his position, and then she left, and then I became the senior clerk. And then quickly thereafter, my judge got elevated to the first department. So I went there with her to the appellate court. And so I had a big change of jobs all within one job really quickly. So it was a little unusual. And after 2 years in the appellate division in the first department, I went into private practice, where I am now an associate at Kasowitz, Benson, Torres. I don't know if we're doing more than that as our intros, but that's sort of the long and short of how I got where I am now.
Jodi, you're muted.
Yep. Let's hear next from Ryan Wagner, who's BLS, class of 2011.
Thank you, Jodi, and good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for having me today. As Jodi mentioned, my name is Ryan Wagner. I'm a 2011 BLS graduate, and I am currently a member of the restructuring and bankruptcy practice at the law firm Greenberg, Traurig. I count myself among the unusual few who knew what they wanted to do when they entered law school. Prior to law school, I was a paralegal in the bankruptcy practice of a large New York-based firm. And as a result of that experience, I developed an interest in bankruptcy law and decided to dedicate myself to pursuing a career in that field. And so during law school, I had the opportunity to intern for 2 bankruptcy judges. And while those experiences were different, the judges had contrasting analytical styles and approaches to dealing with litigants. I learned a tremendous amount from each. I worked closely with their law clerks and kind of developed an understanding of what the judge expected from them, observed what characteristics make a good clerk. And those experiences inspired me to apply for postgraduate clerkships. I began my clerkship in the Eastern District of New York Bankruptcy Court in the fall following my graduation from law school. Bankruptcy judges are federal judges. They're non-Article III judges. Broadly, they are tasked with overseeing the bankruptcy cases of both corporations and individuals. So in the same day, a bankruptcy judge might have a hearing regarding a massive multinational company's request to borrow billions of dollars to allow it to survive during a bankruptcy, followed by a hearing that could determine whether Jane Doe is able to save her home. In the Eastern District, we had a healthy mix of commercial and personal bankruptcies, many of which presented fascinating legal issues. Bankruptcies tend to move very quickly. So whether you are practicing bankruptcy law or working as a clerk, it can be fast-paced and exciting. But as you might also expect, bankruptcy can be very personal, oftentimes very emotional. And as a law clerk and a representative of the court, you need to be cognizant of that when you're interacting with litigants and assisting your judge in his or her management of the case. Impartiality is critical as a law clerk, but we're also humans, and compassion can be part of the job as well. I'd heard very positive things about clerking going into law school. For example, when I was a paralegal at my firm, multiple lawyers described clerking as the best job that they'd ever had. That enthusiasm was motivating, but I didn't fully appreciate what they meant until I clerked myself. And then I understood. For a short period of time, you have an opportunity to be a trusted member of a chambers team. Your judge confides in you and you can confide in him or her. You're relied on by your judge for your analysis of complex legal issues, which result in tangible, impactful decisions. And it really does feel like you're part of something bigger than you, and you're playing a role in the administration of justice. It really does inspire faith in the system. Following my clerkship, I joined the restructuring and bankruptcy practice in the New York office of Chicago-based firm McDermott, Will & Emery. I worked there for 3.5 years before coming over with another partner to my current firm, where I've been for more than 5 years. I've found that my experience as a clerk is really valued by colleagues and clients. I continue to enjoy the bankruptcy practice. I rarely do the same thing every day. It's fast paced and it's intellectually stimulating. So for anyone who may be considering clerking, regardless of what type of judge it may be, I can't recommend it enough. It's valued in the private sector, and more importantly, I think it makes you a better lawyer. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Next, we're going to hear from Gaddi Goren, also BLS class of 2011.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for hosting this event. And I agree a lot of the sentiments that were shared by my colleagues also in the field about clerking. I clerked in the Hudson County Superior Court for a criminal judge. And prior to clerking, I had never really been to New Jersey. It was a great experience, for all the reasons that everybody has already said. I'm still in touch with the judge. We were actually texting this morning about the Jets. It's an experience where you can get to know the judge on a personal level and understand where he or she comes from when making a decision. And when you if you were to proceed in the private practice, it really does provide an insight that otherwise you would not have. In New Jersey, I only clerked for 1 year, as is the practice there. Some of the law clerks in the trial court would proceed to the appellate division, but I knew that I wanted to go into private practice. Following my clerkship in New Jersey, I worked at the law firm of Rifkin Radler out on Long Island. I was there for 3 years, and now I'm a partner at the law firm of Turek, Roth, Grossman in the city. We are in the commercial division quite frequently. I'm a litigator. I've had matters before a lot of the judges in the commercial division. And while I did not get to clerk in the commercial division, I could certainly appreciate how that is a, very unique and wonderful experience. So it really has provided something that I would truly encourage everybody to proceed and to seriously consider if given the opportunity. Especially as a commercial litigator, you can oftentimes pitch to clients, hey, when I used to clerk for the judge, this is the way that he or she may think. So it does provide something that I'm sure will last with me for the rest of my career.
Thank you. We'll next hear from Dongju Lee, who graduated Brooklyn Law School with the class of 2013.
Thank you, Professor, and Brooklyn Law School for inviting me to this panel. I'm currently a clerk for Judge D. Michael Fisher at the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Immediately prior to this clerkship, I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. as a special assistant U.S. attorney, working on fraud and public corruption cases. That was a short-term temporary detailee assignment. And then before that, I was a law clerk again at EDNY for Judges Irizarry, Dora El Irizarry, and Judge Roslyn Moskoff. I kind of took a circuitous way of clerking. I started out my legal career right out of law school as a judge advocate at the Navy JAG Corps, where I had a variety of assignments, including stints as a military prosecutor and as a defense attorney. And I did that for about 6 years. And I love that job and, love getting the practical experience. But, I got older, I got married, I ended up having kids and decided to leave active duty. And, I needed to figure out a way to start my civilian career. I almost was starting my legal career for the second time. And I thought, what better way to do that and to go clerk. And, I was fortunate enough to get, these clerkships, and, I've been enjoying it a lot. I've been learning a lot, obviously, and I share the same sentiments as my colleagues have said already. I've gained a lifelong mentor. I've learned to write a lot, right? I didn't really get to do that in the Navy JAG Corps, and it's been an amazing experience so far. Just a little bit about what I did in law school too. Just I know that people in the audience are students. I was the type of guy who thought that, I'm going to be a prosecutor in one way or the other. All I did was get practical experience. I really enjoyed the legal clinics at Brooklyn Law School, right? I was part of the prosecutor's clinic, the military legal clinic, and pretty much every chance I had, every semester I externed, right, at a DA's office or at the U.S. Attorney's office. And I really didn't think much about clerking. So it's funny that I'm on this panel today, but I guess I say all this just to encourage, everyone to think about it. Even if you think you're not, going to be doing a whole lot of writing in your career, I think there's no better experience than, again, clerking. And it's been a fun ride so far. So.
Thank you. And Myra Din, class of 2016, who is clerked at the magistrate, district court, and appellate court level in the federal courts.
Just following the cases, but kind of. So I think I'll actually copy Dong and start a little bit with when I was a student. So when I was in law school, I really didn't know much about the American legal system at all coming in. I had immigrant parents, so I had a strong interest in world affairs and international law, whatever that was. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what clerkships were. I didn't know what big law is. I didn't know what the difference between the criminal and the civil system was, or the state and the federal system. And I just say all that to try to make the point that I don't think you need to know everything from the beginning. You can figure a lot of it out as you go, but you have to sort of do your due diligence and try things out. So when I was in undergrad, I had studied labor relations. So both of my summers between 1L and 2L and 2L and 3L years, I worked at law firms and was basically trying to do things that were familiar to me. So I was mostly doing labor and employment law. But it was at the end of my second year of law school where I was like, I want to know more about what happens in the federal courts. And I did an internship in a district court in the Southern District of New York. And so if clerkships are something that you're thinking about, the fact that the school is so close to two really great districts, federal districts, is just phenomenal. I think it was like a 10-minute, to get from Brooklyn Law School to the Southern District by subway was like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And the EDNY was like 4, like you just walk up the street. And that's something that's not easy for a lot of students as I'm learning. I'm in Wyoming now. There is one court for the entire state, and it's huge. So the placement of the law school is so excellent. And so after I did my first internship in chambers, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be a clerk because I thought it felt like sitting in a library all day. It's very quiet. You're doing a lot of research and writing. And you really have to think about, is this something I would enjoy? So I kind of put it in the back of my head. There were parts of it I really liked, and then there were parts of it where I just wanted to think more about it. And then in my third year of law school, I interned in a prosecutor's office, also having no idea what prosecutors really did. And I did it in the EDNY to try to cut down the commuting time. And that's how I sort of started dabbling in what happens in actual federal courts. And during both of those internships, I just watched a lot of stuff. I went well above like the hours that they make you put in, just so that I could see different kinds of proceedings, go to different judges' courtrooms, and just watch things. Because if you don't know what the system is like, if you don't have family members who are lawyers in this country, you have to figure it out yourself. And so it's okay to come in with a low baseline knowledge, but then just do your homework and try to learn as you go. So it was during my third year of law school, I was planning to go back to a firm and practice labor and employment. And that's what I thought I would do. It was what was most familiar to me since undergrad. And the professor who was actually in charge of the internship clinic, in Brooklyn, if you're interning, there's going to be someone who's teaching a course that you have to take. That was Magistrate Judge Ramon Reyes. And so I was just very lucky that, I don't know if he still currently teaches the course, but there's usually 1 or 2 judges who are teaching those seminars. And he kind of went out of his way to really get to know all of the students in that course. And he interviewed all of us. And I now wonder if that was like a recruiting technique he had come up with, because I don't know any other judges who make each student come to their chambers and interview as part of the course. But I did that, and he really encouraged me to apply to clerkships and specifically to apply to him. And it was just so great talking to him like that. It took a lot of the nerves out of, we sort of did a secondary interview too, but I remember going back to my law firm where I had an offer to come back, and they specifically were like, you know what, you should try and get an Article 3 judge. They actually told me this, and I'm bringing it up because it's interesting when you see a little bit of the elitism that I think shouldn't necessarily be so staunch in the legal profession. And I just thought, I couldn't think of one person I actually knew at the law firm who had any vested interest in me specifically. And I felt like, here's a professor slash judge, federal judge, who has a specific interest in me. And I was like, I'm going to take my bet on him because I think he's going to end up being a mentor for life. And there might be someone like that at the firm and there might not. I just didn't see any evidence of it yet. And so I didn't take their advice, took the clerkship with him, best decision I've ever made. He is 100% a mentor for life. I also call and text my judges too much about everything, you know, from the news to our families to whatever. And once I had that clerkship locked down, I planned to go back to the law firm. So I did 1 year there. And then once I had that down, I remember talking to the person at Brooklyn Law School who was then doing what I think Professor Balsam now does. And I was like, I'm really interested in a district court. And he really went out of his way to try to get my applications out and got me in touch with another Brooklyn Law School alum, which is Judge Rahman, who is a district judge in the Southern District of New York. And he interviewed me, but he didn't have an opening for the year after I was going to finish with Judge Reyes. So he said he would give it to me for the subsequent year. So I went to a law firm for 1 year. I did labor and employment law, which is pretty much litigation and some extra stuff labor lawyers do. And then I went to the Southern District of New York, did a district court clerkship there. And while I was with Judge Rahman, and I had been interested in the circuit court actually since I was a law student. I just didn't think it was within grasp at that time. I definitely was trying, but I didn't get the sense I was competitive for it. But once I was in the district court, I felt like it was within grasp because I thought I was doing well in that clerkship. And I thought that his recommendation, the district court judge's recommendation, would be the most instrumental thing in a circuit court clerkship. And so I applied and got just this clerkship out here in Wyoming in the 10th Circuit, not a place I ever thought I would live in a million years. And the same thing happened where the judge said, I don't have an opening for the year after your district court clerkship, but I have one for the subsequent year. So I took it. And then I had another year to kill. And I thought about going back to the same law firm that I had been at before. But actually, the great thing about clerking in the federal system is it's not a specialized court. And you see law throughout the federal docket on the criminal and the civil side. And so I was actually interested in trying other types of litigation. I wasn't as scared as I was as a law student. I didn't need to feel as boxed into labor and employment law. So I thought it would be a great idea to try and go to a different firm. And I even wanted to try a smaller firm because I thought that the way work would be distributed would be very different. I would get to do more hands-on trial-related work. And since I was going to be moving across the country to the 10th Circuit, I actually wanted to get used to the 10th Circuit. I wanted to get used to the judges out here, the issues out here, the culture out here. So I found a really great litigation boutique in Denver, Colorado, spent the year there, actually got my first trial, did tons of different law. And now I'm out here in Wyoming clerking, and it's great. I'm about 5 months in, so that's where I am now.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Myra. And just an update on Judge Reyes. He no longer teaches the Judicial Externship Seminar, but he is a member of the Board of Trustees of this fine institution. Another hat I wear besides chairing the Faculty Clerkship Committee is I'm also Director of Externships. And so I'll double down on Tamara's invitation at the outset of this program, as I know that many of the folks who are in attendance are current students. Please come next week to the Judicial Externship info session, because as has been mentioned by a couple of our panelists, it is a great way to explore the option of clerking after graduation and to understand what it takes to take that step. And especially since so much of our audience are currently in law school, maybe we can use this time to have our panelists talk a little bit about what made them such strong candidates for judicial clerkships, that they were picked out of the pool, which is a substantial pool of people applying for these opportunities. So if I could just ask put aside your humility and your modesty, which I know you all possess in droves, and tell us what you think made you such a strong candidate for a postgraduate judicial clerkship. What helped you stand out of the pile? And maybe we'll start with in reverse order that we just went with Myra.
It's interesting because I think about this sometimes, and I feel like there's sort of two different answers. I think in the law, you can't underestimate the value of already becoming a known entity. And so, there's all the stuff on the merits that can make you stand out. But I applied to hundreds of judges through Oscar. I have never gotten an interview from any of those hundreds of applications. Tamara knows I lived in the office. I was always applying to everything. But it's interesting that each job that's on my resume, that's the one job I got that year. And it was somehow a place where I was a known entity. So I think, doing those internships in the SDNY and EDNY, and doing good work. I mean, that's part of the thing. Wherever you are, do good work so that people see your work product and remember you, and be a nice person and stay in touch with people. I think that made a huge difference because I had professors from Brooklyn Law School who Judge Reyes trusted, and they vetted me to him. And then he vetted me to the district judge. And the district judge and Judge Reyes's recommendations, according to my circuit judge, were the things that stood out, even though he didn't know them. So I think what stood out for me, and that kind of plays to my strength, was a little bit of, doing the best job you can do wherever you are in your current situation, whether that's in a classroom, in a clinic, in an internship, and then making that good impression, and then kind of trying to carry the value of it to the next thing that you're interested in.
Dong, what stood out for you?
In all honesty, I think my strong suit or uniqueness was the fact that I was the old guy. I was applying to clerkships 6 years out of law school, and I thought, hey, maybe I'll get a couple looks from judges. And frankly, that really wasn't a good strategy. Just like Myra, I honestly, was on Oscar all the time. And I think I also had applied to hundreds of judges and really didn't get any callbacks. So I, kind of took a different strategy and really thought about, what kind of people would be attracted to my background. So what I ended up doing was I literally researched almost all of the judges, everywhere who had some type of connection to military because, I'm a veteran. And that's where I ended up having some success. I ended up getting a couple of interviews with people who either were veterans themselves or had some type of military connection, whether it was their children in the military or their parents being in the military. So I really did my due diligence, and I think that was the way of getting my way in to at least getting an interview. And of course, at the interview, you do have to go in, very prepared as to why you want to clerk for that specific judge. But I think the biggest challenge for me and probably many of us is actually getting that opportunity to meet the judge, right? You just really have to be strategic about how you go about applying. You can apply to everyone. You can apply to hundreds of judges, but it just may not work, and in all reality, Brooklyn Law School is a great school, but we're competing against the people from Harvard Law and Yale and things like that. And, so you just kind of have to be realistic with, where you're coming from and knowing your audience.
Gaddi, what made your application for clerkship stand out of the pile?
I think it's also, a couple of things. It is a numbers game, but, you have to play with the cards that you were dealt. And for me, I recall I applied, I think 100 judges. I got one interview and I got one offer at graduation. I remember sitting there getting the call. So, I ran with my uniqueness in terms of my background. My parents are from Chile, which is rather unusual. I have an unusual name. It's an Israeli name. So I kind of just ran with what I had, and you kind of got to, tailor your application to the judges that you think you'll have a connection with for one reason or another. Similar to what Don was saying, he researched them and he found judges that had a military connection because of his background. I think when it's a numbers game and you're applying to so many, you have to try to find that connection. It's similar to when you're interviewing for a job and you're meeting with the partner or head of a department or whatever it is. You have to know your audience and apply accordingly. I mean, I did the same, and it's just it's a little bit of luck. I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit of luck with getting that opportunity to interview with the judge and to hopefully build that connection that will result in an offer.
Ryan.
Well, I just echo the sentiments of everyone on this particular point. And I think, again, my situation personally was a bit unique in that I knew I wanted to practice bankruptcy law and work for a bankruptcy judge. So I kind of dedicated myself from the start of law school to that pursuit. So while, of course, excellent grades and strong writing skills are really important for any potential clerk, I think I was able to, I think my interest in bankruptcy and my 2 internships for bankruptcy judges during law school helped me stand out a bit as a candidate. I also think the relationships that I built at BLS and in chambers were really important as well. Professor Gerber, for example, at Brooklyn Law was somebody who was a mentor to me, remains a mentor to me. As he likes to say, I owe him a non-dischargeable debt of gratitude. He's a great guy, and his influence was instrumental in helping me get the clerkship that I did. So there's the tangible stuff like grades and writing skills, but there's certainly the intangibles, building the right relationships, and working really hard and having unique experiences.
And Christine, what had your application in it that stood it out? Why don't you unmute? Yeah. There you go.
Okay, there we go. So listening to everyone and trying to think back now, sadly, this was like 10 plus years ago. But I think echoing what someone else said, I know I spent every semester of law school that I could having an internship or an externship and took advantage of the geographic location of the law school. And my first summer I had interned in the Southern District who was then in the Southern District trial court for Judge Chin. And then during my 3rd year, I worked for Justice Scarpula when she was still in the trial court, who's also a BLS alum. She just happened to be looking for an intern. It was posted as a job posting on our network. And, I had already worked for a judge and had experience working in chambers and drafting opinions. And so when I saw another opportunity to intern in a different court, because I had not really had any experience in the state court system at that point, I applied. And I think that semester I interned at a law firm. I had a full course load and I worked for the judge at the same time. And so I think when I applied for my clerkship, my judge looked at my resume and was like, "You're a hustler. Like, you have hustled this, you've really done so much stuff in your 3 years." And I mean, it truly was because Brooklyn encouraged all of the internship and externship experience, and also because of the location. I could work in Midtown at a law firm on certain days. The other days I went downtown to the judge, and I was able to take class in the morning and at night. And my last semester was crazy, but it got me that experience. And then I think having interned for a state court judge made it very clear that I was a strong applicant for the clerkship in the commercial division. And I'm sure at the time, the commercial division, I don't know if they're doing it anymore, or I think it was a unique year where every judge was hiring a commercial division law clerk. So it was a year where there was an actual formal application process, like a pool. I think now it's judge by judge, or at least in the years after, I know that the pool process stopped and it became more judge by judge. hiring, but I was lucky that that year it was every judge was hiring for, so there were 7 or 8 spots or whatever. And it was a more formal process where there was a first round panel interview, and then you met with you got selected to meet with individual judges. And for sure, the fact that I had shown an interest in New York State courts already by interning with Judge Scarpula, I think helped. And just, not sort of shying away from, at the time, I think there was one person that BLS was able to find who had previously clerked in the commercial division, who was an alum. And so it wasn't as, the commercial division was still sort of a newer thing. And there wasn't a lot of info about it out there, but I just, made sure not to be discouraged by that, not to be discouraged by people saying, well, I've only heard about federal clerkships, I don't really know about this, and not sort of falling into that pattern of, well, if it's not a federal clerkship, like, we're not that interested in learning or, dealing with this. So I kind of had to be a little pushy and get people to get me information and do interview preps and all that stuff, even though it wasn't one of the more traditional paths of clerking at the time, and maybe that's changed now. So I'd just say not to be discouraged, not to think that only federal clerkships are, not that there's anything wrong with federal clerkships. It's an amazing experience, but you can also have an amazing experience in the state court systems in New Jersey, New York, wherever. And if you want to practice in New York, I think it's invaluable experience in either setting. So I just encourage people to take opportunities, and if you want to clerk, to look at opportunities outside the federal system and not think that that's sort of the only road to go down.
I want to say a word about how one finds these opportunities. You folks on the webinar might have heard a couple of references to Oscar, and if you're fairly junior in your law school career yet, you may not know that that is an acronym for the Federal Judicial Clerkship hiring platform, where all of the 900 plus federal judges in the United States, pretty much all of them by this point, post their opportunities on Oscar. It's sort of their version of Simplicity. And students can search those opportunities, set notifications and alerts for opportunities, and apply through that portal, which really simplifies the process for federal clerkships. But as Christine mentioned, for state judicial clerkships, it's a little sort of catch as catch can. Each state does it differently. And unfortunately, the New York State Commercial Division no longer uses that pooling system. But we do have resources in the Career Center for finding those opportunities. And it is an amazing opportunity to clerk in the New York State Commercial Division. It has gotten, it's garnered tremendous respect for how well it's run, for who sits on its benches. And I encourage you all to consider that as a strong and viable opportunity. And I wanted to ask the clerks who might have ever participated in their own judge's hiring process, right? So once you were in chambers, I remember when I clerked, the current law clerks are the sort of first line of defense to sort through and filter all of the incoming resumes and applications for future clerkships. And if you played that role, and in particular, Christine, if you played that role in your setting when you were helping the judge hire for future clerks when the pool system no longer functioned, how did that work? And if the rest of you can think about what you did on behalf of your judge to help them hire future clerks and what sorting mechanisms you used. Go ahead, Christine.
So now that I'm thinking about it, we have actually a funny coincidental story. When my senior law clerk became a judge and we were hiring, at the point where I was going to become the senior person, we were going to hire someone to take my job. As the junior law clerk, I posted it on Simplicity for Brooklyn, and we posted a bunch of different places, but I made sure that we also posted it on our Simplicity. And long story short, we wound up hiring someone who went to Brooklyn, who had a career in private practice for a long time, but wanted to sort of make a career change and get into government or public service. And she's a Brooklyn alum, and she actually just became a judge. She just got elected last year to the civil court in Manhattan. And she started out.
Name?
Ashley Crawford.
Okay.
And
Tamara, write that down.
Yeah, I forget what year she graduated. She graduated before I did, but it was sort of an unusual experience because she had this long career in private practice, but had never clerked and never worked in the New York State courts before. So she came in as the junior role, even though she was senior to me in years out of law school. And she went on to work for other judges, and then she also went to the appellate division. Now she's a judge. And had I not posted, I know I should remind her, had I not posted the job posting on Simplicity, she would not have gotten there. But all that to say that a lot of, and other people have touched on this, you become sort of a chambers family. And so when you're interviewing people, yes, there's certain credentials you look for and there's certain experience you want, but after all of that sort of is taken care of on paper, when you meet with people, you're thinking like, can I live in this small space with them for however many hours a day, weekends, nights? Do I want to invite them to, my birthday dinners? Like people, you spend time in chambers in a way, especially in 60 Center Street, chambers are very small and sort of like carved out of a very old building where some people have closet offices, truly, or elevator shaft offices. True, that's true. So you're spending a lot of time together in very close quarters, and you need to be able to sort of get along and see that person as part of your chambers family. So a lot of the interview is just personality fit, showing your personality, showing who you are and how you would get along with people. It's not like working in an office where you can close your door and, do your thing and sort of like go away. Chambers is a sort of a special kind of work environment that becomes very familial. So you have a lot of the interview process for us, even for interns and for sure for law clerks, was, can this person fit into sort of the day-to-day, family that we have running here? And that includes like people in the courtroom that you work for, that work with you, your deputies or your court clerks and your officers and all those people. And it really comes down to a lot of times a personality fit and just showing that you're ready to sort of join the family and be a team player.
Others, jump in if you've had the experience of helping a judge hire the future clerks.
I actually had a similar experience. It's almost like you have to screen them and vet them before, because while people may look great on paper, once you get them in a room and you have to work very closely, not only physically, but, on a daily basis, it's very important to make sure that personalities match. If the judge, views things a particular way or they have their quirks, you want to make sure that the incoming law clerk won't be, that there won't be a clash between them. So yes, I agree that there's a vetting process, and I would oftentimes ask the incoming or the law clerks questions, just basic questions that would seem rather, trivial. Why are you asking me this? But there was a reason why, because I wanted to make sure that they would match. So.
I would turn this question to Dong and Myra, because you're both clerking now on the appellate level. I remember that when I clerked on the appellate level, my judge specifically wanted me to screen for viewpoint diversity. He felt it was very important to hear from the full range of perspectives and viewpoints out there. He was not looking for yes men or yes women. Thoughts on that?
Well, I can mention a few things. So I happen to be in the minority of judges who formally include the clerks in the hiring process. I think all three of my judges, they definitely sort of filtered down the resumes that they're most interested in an independent process. But oftentimes when the candidate comes to chambers, there's like an informal meeting, which the others kind of spoke about. But as for more to your point, I do know that all of my judges are very, they really respect their current judges. So I have oftentimes been given a resume by some student in some law school, whether through a law firm or through a teacher or through someone. And if I think it's like a really great resume for one of those three judges in particular, either based on personality, background, some academic interest, I might give it to that particular judge and they'll look at it very seriously. I've noticed that for all three. And I think that had a role to do with my circuit judge because his former clerk was a summer associate and a first-year associate with me at the law firm I went to, no connection to Brooklyn. And so he ended up, when his judge really needed an opening, passing my resume directly to the judge. And so, you know, knowing people like us former clerks, we can be kind of useful too, in addition to professors. But in that sense, when my judge did hire me, he's out here in Wyoming. He's never had a clerk of color in his life. He's never lived outside of Wyoming. He's sixth generation. He's very proud. So whether he wanted it or not, I mean, I brought a lot of viewpoint diversity. Even just having like an East Coast culture, we have different work styles, we have different ways of talking and writing. And I think he really was excited about that. He wishes that he got more diverse applications, but somehow even clerkships, even though people are willing to go around the country, they end up being quite regional. People tend to recruit from law schools that they're familiar with, that are near them. And oftentimes they like having that geographic tie. So I think all judges are trying to, you know, at times branch out. But as far as your question, he wasn't looking for like an ideological difference in views on a resume.
Other thoughts about the hiring process from the position of a clerk and participating in it?
Yeah, and I think to add to what Myra was just saying, I haven't been specifically involved with the hiring of interns or clerks at the appellate level, but just from the way my judge has hired, just looking at my co-clerks and myself, we come from all different backgrounds and, you know, diverse views, right? And just to give you an example, one of my co-clerks is a JD. He has a PhD who was an academic. He was a legal professor, you know, prior to coming to clerk. Another person, another clerk was a defense attorney for, I want to say about 8 years. And then the other guy, he was an appellate practice. So maybe it was a regular, normal fit for him to come to appellate court. But, and again, me, you know, I was a Navy JAG. So I think not only did the judge care about, you know, getting people from different ideologies from like a political spectrum, but also just from an experience standpoint as well. And just my experience in both district and appellate, I think all of the judges who I clerked for definitely didn't want a yes man or a yes woman, right? He or she always wanted to debate and discuss different topics and different alternatives of views. And I think it made just the experience better. And frankly, I think the decisions were, it helped them make the decisions when it came down to it. So, and I think from a practical standpoint for interns, I think the application strategy from getting a clerkship and an internship isn't much different, right? You really have to be smart about how you approach it. You know, thinking about the connections that you can make to a certain judge and why you want to apply to a specific person. You do want to note that. There are also the obvious of, you know, not having any typos in cover letters and anywhere in your applications, because, you know, we do see that, and, you know, we do see a lot of applications come in, and we want to have a reason to screen and vet some of these out. So, you know, if I see one word that's unfortunately like misspelled for some reason, even though the candidate would probably be a good candidate, we just have to cut that one out. So
and I wanted to turn to Ryan for the next question, but feel free to jump in on what we were just discussing. You had mentioned in your description how important it was that you had Professor Gerber supporting you in the application process, and a bunch of you have mentioned faculty relationships. And I want to make sure our audience knows how important it is to start building those as early as you can in law school, and that the faculty encourage it and seek it out, because probably one of the most important components of a clerkship application is the faculty recommendation. And you will need, for at least a federal clerkship, you'll need at least 2 of those. And maybe Ryan, you can talk to that a little bit.
Certainly. I guess that there are 2 components to that. Number one, absolutely, the faculty recommendation is critical. As folks who are watching have probably found out already, particularly in the greater metropolitan area, the Brooklyn Law School faculty and staff have excellent connections, and that certainly rings true with Professor Gerber. I was encouraged before I had even started law school to seek him out and try to develop a relationship with him, because he's an excellent mentor, and if he likes you, he'll help shepherd your career. And so that's what I did. And he has personal relationships with a number of not only bankruptcy judges, but the judiciary at large in the area. And his recommendation carries a tremendous amount of weight. And that's true of a lot of the faculty at Brooklyn Law. So absolutely, Jodi, I encourage everyone to take any opportunity possible to develop relationships and form, mentor relationships with folks.
I know that folks are thinking, well, we are in the middle of a pandemic, so how are we going to do that? And I would just say that at least Brooklyn's faculty is open door, open Zoom policy, right? So find us on Zoom, find us anywhere you can in the virtual space, because we do want to support you in this way. I know, Tamara, you've collected some questions from the Q&A. Do you want to pick one out and one that'd be worth us discussing next?
So we only have one question. So here's the question we have in the Q&A. Are there any palpable advantages to waiting a year or a few before clerking versus clerking immediately post-grad?
Interesting. I will tell you that I know one judge in the EDNY who has said to me, she's taken my recommendations for clerkship candidates many times, and she said to me, they have to have at least 2 years of legal experience postgraduate. My docket is so huge, I just don't have the bandwidth to train law clerks the way I used to. What's your all experience out there?
I can start. I think that's a great question. It's interesting. I think every person who's going to employ you wants you to come like ready to hit the ground running. And so sometimes that begs the question of like, well, where can I learn how to hit the ground running for any legal job? Because everyone wants you to come in like perfectly trained. And it's this weird conundrum that I think has been exacerbated more in recent years, because now judges really like to hire out. And I think the trend used to be, from all the people I used to speak to, that it was just more common for people to clerk straight out of law school. So a law firm will tell you, we want you to get your clerkships out of the way. The judge is going to tell you, we want you to go and get, a couple of years at the firm, and you're kind of left in the middle. And I truly think, like, I advocate the magistrate judge clerkship so much, because I truly think that was the perfect place to start. It's not as complex procedurally and substantively as a district court and circuit court clerkship. For someone like me, I like learning the foundation of something, mastering that, and then trying to challenge myself. So that approach worked really well. And you really learn what you would need to be like a young associate at a law firm in a magistrate judge clerkship. Because then I was able to go to the law firm and like really understood discovery. So that was just my plug for magistrate judges, federal magistrate judges. I thought it was like the perfect thing to do, like right out of law school.
I think, I'm obviously a proponent of getting experience before clerking, but I think it really depends on who you are as an individual. Like me personally, coming out of law school, I don't think I was ready for a clerkship. Like I didn't think I had the maturity to be able to handle, so many different types of cases while, making sure, a federal judge would be okay with my recommendations that I give him or her. Right. I just didn't think I had that kind of confidence coming out, but having a bit of a legal experience in the real world helped me gain that confidence. People talk about having imposter syndrome, and I had that, unfortunately, coming out of law school. But getting significant experience before that, gave me the confidence to do it, and I think helped me become a better law clerk when I had applied. So I think you just have to ask yourself, if you think you can gain something out of working a year at a law school before clerkship, then go for it. If not, if you think you're just ready to, like Myra, just go clerk for a judge, I think that's okay too. Of course, be careful and pay attention to the hiring requirements, right? Because Judge Rosario, who I clerk for, has that specific requirement where you do have to work at least 2 years before applying. So pay attention to the specific requirements as well.
Other thoughts?
I do think that, I clerked right out of law school, but now as a practitioner for almost 10 years, I much prefer when I go before a clerk who did practice before, because he or she gets it. They get some of the realities and the practicalities of it. Whereas in my experience, when I go before a clerk that never practiced, they're much more, what do you mean? Why can't you do this? What do you mean? They don't really get it. Whereas somebody who has practiced for a couple of years before they go in chambers, they see the bigger picture.
Interesting. So we've talked a lot about the application process, the timing of it. Could we just spend a couple of minutes talking about life in chambers? And is there something about your in-chambers experience that you found surprising or unexpected, or I didn't realize I was going to have to support the judge in this way, or that this was going to happen? Any surprises, Ryan?
Oh boy. Nothing that comes to mind, although as somewhat of a kind of extension of that. One thing that was readily apparent to me from very early on was the importance of maintaining confidentiality and keep, because as a law clerk, regardless of what type of judge you're working for, you're going to be exposed to non-public information, whether that's through sealed pleadings or whether that's through chambers conferences with litigants. And sometimes that'll relate to cases that are subject to a lot of media scrutiny. One personal anecdote is this was actually when I was an intern in law school. I worked for a Southern District of New York bankruptcy judge who had the bankruptcy of Bernie Madoff's securities firm. And the case had been pending for about a year when I started in chambers, and the trustee appointed in the case hadn't recovered a tremendous amount of money for the estate. So for those that don't know, in bankruptcy, claims trade. So a creditor can sell their claim. So a Madoff victim who might have lost $100,000 could sell their claim to an institutional investor and get money now. And at the time, those claims were trading for like 8 cents on the dollar. But what the public didn't know was the U.S. Attorney's Office and the trustee in the case were in the process of negotiating what ended up being the largest judicial forfeiture in American history. It was a $7.2 billion settlement that would not be announced for another 6 or 7 months, but we in chambers were aware of the progress of the negotiations and the relative dollar amounts that were involved. So if these institutional investors or the creditor body at large or the media had become aware of the nature of these negotiations or the status, not only could it have disrupted the discussions, it would have disrupted the marketplace. It would have been awful. So being entrusted with that sort of information, is a great burden, and you can't violate that trust as a clerk. It's critical that you maintain confidence.
That's really fascinating. Other surprises or something happening during your clerkship you didn't quite expect?
I think one thing I can mention, I don't know if Dong, you have the same experience, is you do have to kind of build your mental endurance. And I think kind of going to the last question, I don't think I was necessarily endorsing that you should go straight to a magistrate judge clerkship so much as if I had come straight to the circuit, I just don't think I would have had the ability to think about such complex issues of law for so many hours straight. But I think having things that help you build that skill was really useful. And so now we don't have hearings throughout the day. We don't have, there are so many more in the district court, whether you're with a district judge or a magistrate judge. And so you have to really have that ability to sit and research and write for so many hours straight. And I'm surprised at 5 or 6 p.m., which is fairly early for me, that my brain is just done. You're exhausted. So that's just one thing that I thought has been surprising in chambers, is that the intensity and the focus goes up, and you need to really build that skill.
And it sounds like it's one very worthwhile building, and I appreciate all of your loyalty and generosity to Brooklyn Law School by spending the time with us this morning. This session is recorded, and so our students beyond those who attended today will have the benefit of your wisdom. So thank you all. It's been an incredible hour spending it with you. Really appreciate it. Healthy and happy. happier new year to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.